Hey everybody, Brandon coming to you today again from the gallery studio here. Today, or in this video, I have a river scene, a bit of a foggy atmospheric river scene. This is based off of a source photo. I'll show you the photo that I took several years ago. Probably one of my favorite fishing related photos that I've ever taken. So this scene here, a little bit different than anything I've painted before with the foggy atmosphere and everything. So there's a lot of trial and error going on this one. So the video of this we'll take a look at now. Alright, so what I have here now is a 16 by 20 canvas that I'm going to be painting a scene that is from one of my favorite photos that I've taken over the years, a fishing photo that I took of some family and friends that were with me up on a river in Tennessee probably over 10 years ago at this point. I'll try to pop that photo up there for you. So that's the reference picture I'm looking at. So this is going to be a little bit different painting here for me this time. I've done a few river scenes to this point that I've painted, but this one you can see is a foggy scene, so there's going to be a lot of fading of color here in the blues, grays spectrum that I haven't done yet, and so I'm going to have to play around with the colors and the fading here to get this thing to look right. So what I'm going to do is I've got it sketched out here in pencil roughly, so I've got it where I want it in terms of the scene laid out, and I'm going to go in here with acrylic paints first, but I'm pretty certain I'm going to have to finish this painting in oils to create those fades that I need for the foggy atmospheric look. So I'm just going to try to get the colors right the best I can with these acrylics that I'm going to lay in. I'm going to start with just some large brushes here to get some paint on the canvas, and put some blocking in of acrylic paint and get it, maybe about at a 50% complete spot, and then I will have to come back after that with oil paints and try to get the fades and the foggy and the atmosphere looking the way I want. So it's going to be a little bit of a trial and error on this one, since it's a bit unlike anything I've done so far to this point. So we're just going to get started here and see what we get. Okay, so now at this point what I'm going to do is drop my brush size just a little bit and go back in here and try to refine the colors a little bit, get them a little bit closer to where we're trying to end up, and work on the fades a little bit from the darker to light. So it's going to take a little bit of going back and forth from darker tones, lighter tones, and playing around with the color a little bit here. So it's going to be a lot of just trying to figure it out as I go along, but I'm going to try to get this thing as close to where I want it to be with these acrylics as I can before I start with the oils, and then the oils will be what I really finish it up with. So we're going to get started now playing around with these colors and trying to adjust these purples and blues and grays in here to make this thing look the way we want it to look. Okay, so I laid in a little bit of the indications of the rocks and the areas in acrylic just to get an idea of how those were going to look on canvas before I start doing my oil paint on top of this. So now I'm going to come in here and pretty much redo everything in oils and create a better fade for my fog in that atmosphere. And we will then play around with the colors until we get it the way that we want it to look. So this is again going to be some more trial and error here. I'm going to start with the real light pale kind of purple blues that come through here in this area of the fog that's above the water, and then the reflections in the water. And I'm going to try to create that color fade from here out where it gets darker. And then the last thing that I will do after I've done all that is work on the rocks and the ripples and reflections down here in the water itself. That'll probably be the very last thing that I do. So we're gonna get started with that now and see how that works. Alright, so I've gotten pretty happy with the overall fade here of the fog and the atmospheric fade that I've got going on there, and the reflection, the main reflection of the water. So now I'm going to start with this top tree line up here and create some branches and tree leaves that are up, extending up into the skyline that fade off into the distance. And I'm going to do that with an angled brush. And I start up here in this corner and try to work my way from this darker stuff and then lighten it up as I go this direction and fade it down into this fog. And so that's what we're going to work on next, and we'll see how it goes. Alright, I'm pretty satisfied now with this tree line up here up against the sky and that fade that I've got going on with it. So I think now I am going to start over here on the tree that is on the right hand side. I'm going to move the canvas over a tad bit. I'm going to start on this tree over here, and the biggest key on this tree is just keeping the saturation and the tone down of the areas that are a little further away, that are a little lost back there in the fog in the distance, and then some of the areas of the tree that are a little closer to the foreground, having a little more saturation, a little more color to them that make it appear a little closer in the fog. So that's what we're going to do next, and I'm mostly going to use the same angled brush that I've been using, small angled brush, again with some oil paints. And we'll get in here and start working on that. I may do some finer details out on the edges with a smaller liner type brush, but we'll see once we get started. Alright, as I'm continuing to work on this tree here on the side, you'll notice again that I've got some areas in the back that are not nearly as saturated with color, and the tone is not as vibrant to make it appear further off in the distance. And then as I'm coming forward here now on the tips of this closest tree, I've switched over to a different brush. This is actually a blender brush, but it's almost like a liner. that I can get a little sharper edges with on some finer details. So that's what I'm going along the edges now with. Okay, so for now, I think I am pretty happy with everything above the waterline there, so to speak. I like the way that the sky there and the fog in the distance and this tree that's kind of hanging over here are looking now. So I think I'm going to move on now to the three guys that are walking into the picture here. I'm going to work on them a little bit, and once I kind of get them where I like them, we're going to get started on the water and all the rocks, which is obviously going to probably take the most amount of time to play around with. But let's get started on these guys here. It's the same kind of idea as this tree. So this fella's further away, so I'm going to use a lesser saturated color here and make him appear further away, so there's going to be less detail back there, and he's going to look like he's further away in the fog. And then as I move forward to this guy, I will use a little bit more saturated color and bring up the tone to make him look a little closer into the foreground. And obviously the sizes are giving you the illusion of that as well. But that's what we're going to get started on next. I'm going to use a fairly small brush here, probably liner brush, to get this done, since I got to do a little bit of detail work around these people. So let's get started on that next. Okay, so after playing around with the colors on these three guys walking through the middle of the river here, I have determined that I think the best way for me to pull off the foggy atmospheric effect on them was to just go ahead and put in their colors with the darker tones as they would appear, but then go back and I'm going to put a kind of a thin glazed wash over all of it when I'm done to create the foggy effect in front of them. So I'm going to do the same thing with the rocks. So I'm actually going to go in here and put all the rocks in some of the water effects, and then at the end of it essentially come back in with a thin glaze of this foggy color over the top of this, put a thicker glaze back here over this guy because he's the furthest away, and then start to thin it down as I move into the closer stuff to the foreground, so it'll hopefully give that appearance of depth in the scene. But trying to create that effect just with the colors on these guys, I was finding that to be a little bit too difficult. So I think it's better for me to pull it off just painting them as I want to paint them, and then go back and do this wash over them after I'm done. So we'll see how that works out. Okay, so now I've got to come in here on top of these guys here and bring in this foggy atmospheric look over top of them. So I'm going to take my oil paints now and come over this gray color, bring it in front here with a thin glaze, and try to create that depth with these guys here in the front. As I cover it up, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to basically take this gray color and just paint right over this guy And then I'm going to thin this color up as I move forward, so this guy in the back here will be covered up a good bit to make him look further off in the distance. And then as I move forward here, I will thin this glaze up a little bit, so it'll look like these things in the foreground are closer. Okay, I think that I'm going to call this one finished. Again, this is my first attempt here at this kind of foggy atmospheric effect. And I'm relatively pleased with this here. I mean, my guys here, the detail on them is not perfect, but I think that it is good enough for me on this attempt, and I'm pretty pleased with the result here.